Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear guests on your screen in our show. Today we have the pleasure to have an expert back again after 2 years, Dr. Christian Knoll. Christian is not only knowledgeable in CRM solution in his own company, but he has a certain background and reputation in other companies earned over the years. He has a rich and wealthy experience in strategic planning, business development, and CRM implementation. Under his leadership, the spiceCRM has grown to become a trusted partner for businesses looking to optimize their customer relationship management processes. Christian is known for his customer-focused approach and active communication style, which have helped him build strong relationships with clients and stakeholders. Fluent in both German and English, he has adapted at navigating the complexities of international business environments. And in former roles, he was also in the board of Kinamo, a sugar CRM partner, and earlier, before there, in several roles at SAP. Dear Christian, welcome, and it is a pleasure to have you back again. And what did I miss in the introduction?
Thank you. I think there was nothing to miss. I'm surprised by all the things I learned about myself. I'm going to record this and play this back. So I think it was very positive. Thank you. And it's great being back on the CRM Converse again. So
we have some interesting topics we would like to discuss in the upcoming hour. And we have from the digital sovereignty, the SAP CRM Potential follow-ups, and the use for AI benefits for customer experience, three blocks of interesting approaches. And I would like to start with the very interesting aspect of the digital sovereignty. As in upcoming projects, a lot of customers in the consulting space I'm addressing, and I may give a word or an advice, are asking how they should go forward with their wish to go into a cloud. So the growing market for own managed clouds seems to be upcoming. What is here your perspective and your experience from your own business, Christian?
Maybe we start with defining own managed cloud, because this sounds like own data center.
not necessarily. I think we can start from the public versus the private versus whatever cloud, So I always keep saying there is no cloud, there's just somebody else's computer, So that's one of the big things. I think the interesting part is, when we started with the spiceCRM project, originally we were late to the cloud. So we built it for the cloud and we had the cloud, but we never gave up on the on-premise. And in the meantime, over the last couple of years, I still saw a lot of customers still leaning, especially larger customers, to on-premise deployments. And now even smaller customers. And I think while this is the case, the other thing that I saw over the last, it's really like only 6 months or so, of course, driven by, no need to say about global politics and geopolitics or whatever. Currently, there's a lot of uncertainty, especially in Europe, about what's happening with US-based cloud service providers, what's happening to basically everything which is related to anything which was Cloud Services Act and whatever. Given the current administration in the US, there's, of course, the big question, where am I? And on top of that, the other thing you see, there is new, basically, regulations like NIS2, which adds on top of that. Especially larger ones are basically required to have more transparency about their data security and fallback strategies and whatever. And of course, if you multiply this all up, there was a couple of requests which I'm getting over the last couple of months where people also ask, okay, It was always important, where is your data hosted? So this is basically where are the servers are they within the European Union? And in the meantime is also who's operating them, And so while I see, again, a way bigger trend and tendency toward on cloud solutions, the other thing I see, and just today I got a tender from a public government organization that basically says they either want it on premise or they want to have it in a dedicated European cloud-based operating environment, which I think is quite interesting, And the other thing, a couple of weeks ago, I got another interesting request from a lead that said, okay, we are currently on HubSpot and we are currently looking at alternatives because we don't know what's happening to the American data provider. And so this is not sure that this is something that's really that much of a trend yet, but there's definitely a tendency where I see people basically taking more considerations. Who is operating their environments? Who is basically running the systems, where the data is and whatever is happening. So I think that's something that people take more care about these days.
And I believe they also see some differences if they have their handy nice calculator in their fingers and they see that there is a pricing gap developing between a cloud solution and something they have different rights on, and they might have also the ability, if their vendor is no longer existing, if this is happening, you have the source code. But on the other end, there are advantages which are at least marketing-wise promoted, that it is no longer useful to put things on your own iron or in your own environment, as you cannot profit from some services and advantages in the technology on one end, and on the other end, some of these vendors which have fabulous clouds coming from Germany, I think of a small little village, they have their own data centers in their own, you could say, garden, and they build several of them. So they seem to understand the need for serving customers locally, not only European-wise.
That little village, there's a lot of asparagus currently because it's the asparagus season. It's going around.
Especially the asparagus season, but no joke here. I just learned yesterday from my wife, which read the newspaper to me, that we will get a data center in my small town. I wonder how they manage the tricky internet connections I do have regularly, how they will serve people there properly.
I think you're completely right. There's, of course, big benefits sometimes on cloud deployments because you're sitting on a backbone, you have redundancy, you have typically better service availability. But on the other hand, the options you're mentioning is what customers are also getting aware of. There was in the beginning a very big trend towards the cloud, and everybody of the software providers, including ourselves, of course, is happily moving to subscriptions until the customer figures out that this is, of course, for a good reason, because the software vendor makes more money on it. So that's clear. And especially then afterwards, the lock-in, which we've also seen, and it's something that's obvious, especially in business critical applications like a CRM. If you lock yourself in and you basically invest, it's nothing you're going to rip out easily, because that's a painful project. It was painful to implement it. Then it's running, and then replacing it is nothing that's that easy, So I think one of the benefits, and of course what we also market to our customers, is that we say we leave it open to the customers. You can deploy in the cloud, you can deploy on site, we leave it completely open to you. And this comes back, I think, to Thomas's question, because it says you can run it in your choice of cloud, being it your own or being something where you say, okay, this is my preference. And we have customers that say, I want to have it on AWS, and others want to have it on Azure. And we say, okay, that's fine. basically we are open and we are flexible in terms of that. And we can also accommodate a stack where this is the case. Or if you take larger customers like ours, like A1 Telecom, they are like a large telco provider. They have their own, by the way, EU-based cloud service provider. They, of course, run it in their really own cloud, but they also provide it to others with like Exoscale, which is a true European cloud service provider. But I think that's a flexibility which is also nice for a customer. And I think it's an option where you say, okay, it's nice if you have the option. You can move and you can decide. And the other thing I think that a lot of customers also learned, which we are seeing they are getting aware of, is that sometimes if you try to basically cancel your contract with a cloud service provider, sometimes it's not that easy to basically get your data again. So I think we have a lot of like burnt customers, which I have seen, which then didn't have it that easy to basically get data out. The larger ones potentially are easier because they have standardized programs, but especially some smaller ones, I've seen very bad behavior of some of the providers, which honestly I don't understand, because you always meet the customer for a second or third time. So, and past is always cross again, so I never understood why you would not basically comply and support the customer. And if the customer wants to move to another party, let them move. If they come back and you have been nice to them, they might remember you and come back later. If not, there's nothing to lose. But I think it's also something that people get aware of, that they're saying getting out of the cloud is not that easy. And that all paired together then with like the current geopolitical situation is something, of course, that basically draws customers back. And I think the other thing I see is that the European Union is getting more stringent in terms of data protection and the data laws. So I think that's quite more strict. And the more you look at it, the less you basically should look at some of the data governance policies of some of these cloud providers. Because now and then I still get, which I'm amazed, I still get newsletters from like customers running MailChimp in Europe. If you ever read what MailChimp writes in there and you know a little bit about GDPR, or you are what Thomas likes, best certified by GDPR, then I think a lot of like smaller providers or very special providers, you really wonder if you take the data protection laws in the European Union serious, how you can basically put your data on some of these service providers. And I think some of these customers don't take it that serious. But again, I think this is one. And the other thing I think is interesting, but it's still like a little bit, that's part of, if we talk about politics, the European Union and the strengths of the European Union. But I think the topic of Gaia X as a cloud standard, as an open standard, is, I think, an interesting one. But currently it's completely under the radar. But I think it's something where I think also the European Union could be way stronger and way more promoting that. So I think that's a quite important initiative in terms of also establishing real data centers and cloud service providers in the European Union. A little bit opposing the dominance, of course, which is currently all coming from the US, because if you take Amazon and Microsoft and Google.
Just wanted to say, hasn't that train left, building a competitor to even Alibaba or Baidu? So being able to compete at scale, one of those five, including the three that you just mentioned.
See, I think the story with the open platform, I don't know if you even need to compete on the level of scale. That's for me questionable, because if you take like what we signed an agreement with Exoscale, which is mainly focusing on the DACH markets currently, it's a Swiss-based provider. They are mid-sized, but they fulfill all standards, They run really their data centers locally, Also, they put a lot on like, which is another topic, environmental standards. So basically, all like power and electricity coming from hydro-generated and renewable energy and whatever, And also, I think it's interesting from the European Union having potentially mid-sized providers, that can also serve at the same level, because the tools are getting better. And I think if you provide with Gaia X an open platform and an open standard for a cloud service provider that can run on more and smaller ones, why do you need the ultimate big one, So I think Europe is a very diverse country. I think the scale of money, I think then typically because I don't think you need that much to basically be that efficient. If you compare the costs, I currently get it like one of these providers, they're all in the same range. I think funny enough, something like Amazon is even more expensive because they charge you a hell of a lot of traffic. But on the other hand, if I compare what like Exascale asks for compared to like what I pay for GCP, it's very comparable. I think they're both profitable. So I think the platform as such, if you have a shared platform on like an open standard, is something that can be operated very efficiently, and can be a good option. And I think if you look at Europe being like also a very diverse conglomerate of countries, it might be a good option to have smaller ones that have more options, which on the other hand, as a cloud service provider, is also interesting. Because if you basically check your risks, it's always good to balance and basically have more options. And I think it's very good if there is a more diverse ecosystems around that. So I'm not sure that it really needs to be something that is completely up on the scale of like a Google and says, okay, that's part of that.
Interesting enough. I have, let's say, critical perspective on Gaia X, as it's not only flying under the radar, but it sounds for me and looks for me like a patient which needs dramatically fast reanimation or he is gone. And the other thing is that on the positive end, there are movements such as in the city or area of Karlsruhe, where the first internet connection in Germany is been promoted, that they had the official first internet address. They have some large cloud centers coming out of the old formerly 1&1 and web.de, which is now Jonas, and they are in competition, but also in co-opetition with, for instance, the Lidl group, which is more known for their food chains. Interesting enough, they have gone into certain kind of partnerships to drive at least a German-speaking Europe cloud-based initiative, and they won a certain visibility and high reputation by those which are utilizing this. This includes also that you get free of charge from their perspective useful European-based AI tool sets, even if they are nearly unknown or not as popular, which I found quite interesting to see that they try to give you the general advantage of artificial intelligence, but also in a German-hosted environment from German providers. Probably that is one perspective. But to be fair, if we look at the perspective of challenges in the US, are there not also existing some challenges if we look at the European-based cloud solution centers?
First of all, coming back to Lidl, I remember Amazon being an online bookstore, so I'm not a big cloud service provider, so why not Lidl, That's obvious. Also, Gaia X, I agree with you. I think it's a good question where it is, but on the other hand, I think it's currently a good opportunity because the whole situation is accelerating a lot of things, So I think that might be a good option. The risk on European cloud providers, I don't see that much of a risk there because I would not know what the big risk should be. I think the only risk can be that, again, we are like typically making us smaller than we are. So this might be the only risk. But other than that, I think there's definitely good engineering and there's great services and there's great capabilities. So why not do it, The other thing is, and the other thing that might be a good accelerator for that is, which comes to my open source part of my business, is that the current economic situation is also sometimes a good accelerator, because currently the uncertainty in figures, basically that the economic is not growing, On the one hand, for CRM, it's typically good because if you don't sell that much, then it's easier to bend the sales team and basically do something on the CRM side. And the other thing, a lot of decisions are taken more cost cautious and less brand aware, So in a lot of situations, if money is not an issue, then brand sometimes prevails and you say, okay, I cannot go wrong if I take a big brand name and I just afford it, On the other hand, if you have to basically look at the money you're spending as a company or enterprise, then suddenly other alternatives also look very attractive, And then it might come back to saying, okay, this might give you certain, let's say, economical benefits and also some options, and you don't need to have the big brands.
I'm not aware if our audience does know that 2 years ago, the largest French-based cloud center, which served also for the French state and a lot of partner organizations, burned down with at least 12 centers, and all their recovery and whatsoever was existing down to the ground by not following fire inspection rules and necessities. And there was an incident which made quite clear that greed could be on European ground as on American ground a challenger. So I wanted to share that aspect as one of the critical passes on even that I would go and love European hosting, that you can do some stuff here wrong as well. My perspective.
See, that's clear. So if somebody is not having certain procedures in place,
like physical redundancy.
What can you do?
Put all eggs into one basket, then well,
it was even worse, Thomas, as I checked in preparing the convo on this fire incident, and that it is unfortunate that they were standing too close to each other, the separate housings, and that they did not have the idea in the redundancy. The redundancy was only several hundred meters away, such as the block 1 was kept the redundant part in block 12. And when all 12 burn, there is no further redundancy, such as on a very different space where they had all the security, such as in one of the Swiss mountains, where some Swiss data centers love to keep their stuff in, not say bulletproof, but atomic bomb safe places. Who will use the data after we had that incident? I don't know, but at least the data is safe. No bad jokes than that one. Apologies, but it is simply there are some challenges also in the European environment, and we should also pick up the question if we do have the concerns as a business institution or a public sector organization or a non-profit organization, and we do rely on several issues we do have. What are the concerns in a validation of a neutral institution, such as does TÜV Germany give also an AWS cloud in Germany give the certificate? A question.
I think the certificate they will get, so that's, I think, a clear story, so that's, I think, a logical thing, and the other thing, of course, is if you basically operate cloud services, then it's also a little bit your own responsibility to basically balance your own services and your own servers geographically more widespread. So if you put everything, because you can do the same literally, I can today put everything into one Google data center, And I can separate it in zone A, B, C there, which I've never been to one, but I imagine it's similar to like you say, so it's close to each other. Or I can spread it over different geolocations, and the same, I can also spread it over different cloud service providers. So I can basically have fallbacks between cloud service providers and beyond geographies, which I think is logical if you operate something like that. At least for me, it's logical that I basically spread this geographically. Of course, you need to trust, some trust you need to have in a provider. So if they tell you the data center is in Frankfurt, you need to trust it that it's in Frankfurt and it's not somewhere else, But I think there's much trust I would have in those,
You mean you can trust that it's not in Moscow?
That would be a wild guess. I would say yes. It's not in Moscow if it has an American logo on it.
Well, I probably would be more worried if it were in Kiev.
But honestly speaking, having enjoyed that very nice joke, if you look to several competitors which are internationally serving, they have the strategy that they have US-based, UK-based, France-based, and in addition, some German-based data centers. But it has not only to do with data safety and redundancy, but simply with what Thomas mentioned earlier, scalability, and that they are able to serve, for instance, peak requests if they have shopping incidents such as Prime Days or dedicated shop as your business, as your credit card is going to flames, as there is no tomorrow. Sometimes I'm wondering how these systems are capable of managing this.
On the other hand, I think you're right. But if you take the number of customers and the scale of customers, of course, if you say I'm Amazon, then you need to have a different scale. Yeah. Maybe if you have a booking platform like Lufthansa, I don't even know what scale they need, but the typical, even so the enterprise customers we serve, a lot of them act or in a local environment, a lot of them act like on business to business scales. And even if they have some 100 millions of data records or whatever, and a couple of thousand users, it's still something that's quite manageable. So I think that's the need that you really have to scale for utter high volume end consumer business, the number of companies requiring there is something that's probably overseeable. The vast majority of customers run like the ERP or CRM or CMS systems or web shops or whatever, and have a somewhat predictable traffic, and can definitely balance on even let's say regional scale. And I think I'm quite happy with that. So if you really look at operations that need a complete global deployment, okay, then you are back. But that's fine. But I think they don't have the concerns. If you really talk about these complete global acting customers, they probably have less a problem also if the data is hosted in the US and with Chinese providers or whatever. But if you take a lot of the majority of companies that reside, if you take a European Union, I think they definitely are completely fine with a European deployment. And I would wonder if in today's cloud environments and with today's cloud providers, how many of them run the service in the US and not only utilize at least European-based servers, where with a lot of services you can decide where the server resides, which I think also makes it different, only where's the server versus who operates the software. So basically who is running the software also makes a difference. But I would say that a lot of the European companies look at European providers where the data is also operated in Europe, and as you say, also SAP is running the data centers here. So there's probably also sufficient for a wide group of the customers they are serving. So.
And SAP is going out of the data center market. Look at their numbers. The infrastructure as a service is a business model that is going that way, like on premises, it's going that way. It's deeply so. And that's a deliberate decision.
I think if you take at least from the CRM numbers, I see the CRM space is growing. And
no. So we are talking infrastructure here. SAP, their infrastructure as a service business is declining, and that's a conscious decision.
Yeah.
It's a conscious decision. They cooperate with IaaS providers and put their platform on top of it. So they go away from running their own hyperscaling, which is, we can say it's right or wrong, but that's the way they are doing. So we shouldn't use them as an example for a Germany-based or European-based cloud provider, where they provide platform services, they provide PaaS and SaaS, and they go away from IaaS.
The interesting story from SAP, which I anyway think is other interesting, is that one of the differences they make is that they have or had a good on-premise customer base. And I think still a good chunk of their customer base still would want to stay on-premise. So that's my view. So,
yeah, but they won't.
No idea why they. Of course, I understand commercially. I understand why they are going in one direction. You know, from the customer focus, I think they are basically going against the customer base. I think that's an interesting story. So, of course, sometimes customers might not have another choice, but I think it's always better to leave a choice to the customer than basically forcing a customer one or the other way. But I think the asset that SAP had over other providers is something they are giving up. Most likely, definitely across the year, because they nothing about SAP. They are completely performing and it's great and valuable company, you know. However, if you talk to customers, there's not only happiness about these things, you know. So I think that's something I think where they would have, especially in the CRM space, if you compare them, look, the Salesforces or the Microsofts in a lot of worlds, you know, where there's just absolutely no option to go on premise. They would have the technology to go there. And I think also coming to the discussion you mentioned in terms of other services, you know, like AI or whatever, I think we are in the meantime living in a service-based environment. So I think it's not needed that everything runs in the cloud, and it's not needed that everything runs from one provider, and it's not needed that everything runs in the same data center. I think what we were talking about many, many years ago about a service-based architecture is in the meantime quite a reality. So you can really basically assemble systems where you say, okay, you take services from here and other parts from here and assemble your solution. So I think it's not a necessity and absolutely no problem to say some of your systems run on premise, you know, others run in the cloud, and others run from these providers and others run from that provider. And it's something I even see with customers and also with tenders and leads I have, where there's definitely a tendency of some saying, don't put all the eggs in one basket, basically spread that, you know, and saying because you're basically too dependent on one provider. So I think the reality that you say, okay, I can leverage services from somebody else, and just because I have some systems on premise limits me from using AI, I think is a myth. That's something created to basically make it mandatory for customers to move your service. They say, okay, I'm only providing you some of my software and some of additional functionalities if you move to the cloud, which I think is just trying to force a customer in one deployment mode, which is, of course, understandable again from the commercial side, because, of course, you get a higher revenue and whatever. But from the customer side and technologically, I would not see any necessity for that, you know. And the other thing with some of our real large enterprise customers, they also ran through assessments with us in terms of which systems are cloud ready and which, from their perspective, are not cloud ready, you know. And especially if you take telco from the example, they said, for example, some of the areas like CRM, where we are quite very transactional, they said it's something they don't want to put in the cloud because it's way too integrated for everything, just from the integration perspectives and everything. They basically want to run on premise. Others they have in the cloud, you know, but they have a complete hybrid deployment where they say, okay, they basically put it together, and they have like the enterprise services bus that connects these things, you know, and then in the end, it doesn't matter if the system is in the cloud, is here, is there. Basically, it's stitched together and acts as one. So that argument, I think, is for me not a valid one. So it's just a commercial or marketing one where I try to force your customers.
Not having doubts that Thomas still loves a product which he has worked several years on. I was wondering how you are receiving the market. Shout out, Christian, as you mentioned it already, that some customers would have preferred to stay on their known environment and on premises or on site, and that they are now challenged either to move into the cloud, either with the SAP ecosystem, with the Sales Cloud, the Service Cloud, and what they have in the stack on what is suitable for them for e-commerce marketing. But on the other end, the reputation of the CRM capabilities has been challenged, such as from the outside looking, we were asking ourselves as being industry analysts on several occasions and events, where is the roadmap for the next big thing in the CRM arena or in the CX arena? On the other hand, behind the curtains, something was created, well developed in a different matter, not in the same probably capabilities, but what they showed us in the Sales Cloud version 2 was quite impressive. Saying this, I just took some numbers and analyzed how much new sales they publicly announce, what is known, and on the third end, how much is going to competition. As some companies, US-based, which have sales in their name, are very strong, known to be chosen front end, such as I take the premium product in ERP and I take the premium product in CRM, so I make no mistake as a customer. What's your reaction on that?
That's completely fine and completely valid. If you can afford and want to do that, then feel free to do. But the other question is, can you afford it? So that's one part of it. And the other thing, open and honest, I think not wanting to crash the party, but I think there's a lot of innovative ideas and wonderful things basically proclaimed out there. On the other hand, my reality, if I talk to and see CRM deployments, we still have to do a lot of explanations and basics to even get the data right and everything to basically get to that level. So there's always some poster child out there, that basically can utilize all of that. But I think for a lot of customers, it's still a long way to go. What's the next big thing in the CRM space? A very good question. I don't have a crystal ball, AI is definitely something that is of interest. My personal opinion on that is that's still in its infancy. So I think that still needs to prove that what the value is. And I think there's a lot of people trying to figure it out. The AI cases I have seen are not new. So we have this with customers already, especially in the enterprise stage. But that is not something that comes out of the box. That is something that is highly trained and highly customized, typically for very specific cases. That's at least what I've seen. The typical thing that, let's say, the regular person out of the street currently associates with AI, I think, has not much to do with CRM as of today, because generative AI, for me, has no impact, literally no impact. That's something that is very nice, and I have no idea where it takes us. But from a CRM perspective, I don't believe in it. I think just the opposite currently. It might get to a point where you can differentiate yourself if you have a true human and intelligent customer service or customer interaction. Because I don't know how you feel, but I'm on LinkedIn, and the number of LinkedIn posts I get and messages, which you immediately see they are just AI written, I read the first 2 lines and I delete them one after another. And I can immediately, after like first 1 or 2 lines, distinguish if this was a human and wants something, And the thing I get is, we get the questions from customers that say, I need generative AI because I need to write emails to customers. And on the other hand, we have CRM providers that write AI that basically read the emails and extract the information and summarize it. So it's 2 AIs, basically the one bloating it up, writing it nicely, and the other one condensing it to say what did they want to say, which is from my perspective fun. And so I think there's a long way to go. There's of course some scenarios, but the things I see is more real, like very specific cases. They might find standardization in some cases in CRM, but I think that also needs to be proven currently. So we're still in the ages where like even the product proposal engines are not properly working. If you shop something and buy something on Amazon, you still get for like the next 3 weeks the same product proposed, And as long as this is the case, I wonder what AI will generate in the other cases. And as I said, I also LinkedIn, I think 1 or 2 months ago, posted just a very bad experience about customer service, where you see, okay, what AI can do in terms of bad customer service. Yeah, I was shopping on some big online fashion retailer, and they basically dropped the package completely soaked and torn up on my doorstep. And my neighbor picked it up and basically they sent me a picture, and I sent them a message back claiming that the package arrived there, including a picture, which was completely torn apart. And then I get an automated message back 5 minutes later. They received my message for the shipment, which I ordered then and then in American date format, And if the shipment is not there yet because the postal claims it is there, I should go to the postal office or ask my neighbors. So this was the automated reply, So where I say, okay, this is about where this was truly written by a bot, and it was basically the worst you could do in terms of customer relationship. And so I think until that gets to a stage, I'm really wondering how far that will take us, in terms of what AI does. So I think there will be benefits, no doubt, and there is capability. But I think that needs to go through the hype curve and find some scenarios that really make sense. And then it's a good question if this completely changes the CRM space. Honestly, I don't know. I cannot tell you.
Have you learned so far from your customers, aside of the questioning that they have still with the groundwork very much to do to get their data clean, to get their connections properly established on the systems which they are utilizing? As one of our blocks of question was relying to the potential benefits. So you described some of the things you have not yet seen. Have you seen, from playing around, going forward, to starting points where customers have established some beneficial approaches?
Now, see, the topics that are good, of course, but that's the question, what's the big AI about it, where we see things like churn prediction or others. I think that's clear, but that's not novel. That's nothing that big new. It can get a little bit better, The same we see is in upsell and cross-sell and supporting potentially sales guys with the typical, even so currently it's tricky. The next best action, I think, it would be a very good proof point and very supportive. But so far, I haven't seen anything that really proves. I've seen some ideas, But if you look at what's really in there, then it's a good question. Is the basically artificial intelligence right or not? So it's a little bit more of a gamble. So you can roll the dice, but it's not predicting. It might be a support that might give you as a salesperson some idea and some support in some cases. That's right. That's good. The other thing I think we're currently pursuing, but that's more in the consumer sector, I think that can make a change is in the omnichannel communication. So basically driving that more intelligently. But I think also we need to be very careful in terms of that. But I think that is something where I could see a change definitely happening. But also, I think currently there's a lot of ideas, so that's the story. And if that really becomes fruitful, I think it's really fruitful. The interesting story for me is that what I also see is that email is coming back to action. So that's interesting. So a certain time newsletters went down. In the meantime, they go up again. I think a lot of people get fed up of social media because they have such an overload. Some of the platforms came and are more going. So I think that form of communication and this more omni-channel communication, driven and supported and steered by some intelligent engine, I think that could have bigger potential, definitely. So that's something I see. The service side is, from my perspective, interesting to questionable. And I can only talk about my own experience. I was always fed up in the years before with the IVR. So if you want to, then press 1 and then press 2 and then press 5 and whatever. And in the meantime, wherever you go on each web page, there's like a bot that is more or less useless. You ask a question, you never get really something good back. So I think for me, it has also the potential to not only not provide any value, but basically destroy your reputation if you do it wrong. So I think some of these implementations you see where people just basically let you on a chatbot to the website and think that's funny, and try to service people is quite different. So I'm always happy if I call somebody and there's somebody helpful, who can help me as an agent and basically solve my problem. Makes a big difference, I think.
Don't you think that the attitude towards work is changing or has been already changed, such as in contact centers, where in large frequency they are asked for the same questions and they would like to give a more friendly answer or more knowledgeable answer, that they are supported, such as we have several CRM convos where providers of call center solutions were talking that the supportive effect, the knowledge effect, and make people act smarter as they really are, such as it is easier to get AI support in going through a large documentation and find the right answer instead of flabbering around in paper.
We also run CRM for some larger call centers doing that, So I think there's really a benefit which you can use, but it's not that much intelligence. So it's pick up some words and support a nice search, And the other thing, what you're saying, there's a lot of like standard answers they anyway have. And some more specific ones where if you just have good documentation on certain cases and make it easier for the person to find, that's all it. But the biggest difference, also from my experience, is if you have people who are motivated there and have the proper attitude. Because you can tell if you call a call center and there's somebody motivated because you have a proper work environment there, and you have proper people that basically have a proper way of handling you, then they will provide you a decent service and you will feel it as a customer. So I think the biggest topic for me is that I always keep saying, like, the customer experience starts with the person there. And the person is driven by the appreciation and the management. That's the most important thing. And you feel immediately the culture of a company by how they respond to you and how they work with you. Of course, you can make the life easier, that's no question asked. But the biggest thing for me is still the human interaction. I think that's my view is that this will gain more and more importance and will be a way bigger differentiation in terms of service, which you potentially have to pay for. Yeah, that's fine. But on the other hand, I think good service makes the difference and does it. So you can support them. AI can potentially do that and can be supportive, but still the most important thing is the human asset that sits on the other end. Because if they just have a nice attitude and they can also pick up your emotions and whatever, and they can basically react, which likely an artificial intelligence engine cannot do, Which I thought was funny. I recently read a nice publication of like some content providers and journalists where they were looking at some AI tools to basically read the articles, And one of like the guys was saying, we are completely lacking emotion. An AI cannot read an article with emotion. They cannot make breaks or basically pronunciation and so whatever, So like this human interface is not that easy.
Coming back to the aspect, oopsie Lou, I went to the wrong chat. Well. I love to make mistakes. The one I wanted to jump in is feel a bit like the wrong advocatus diaboli in that case, as Thomas and what I found in some other posts as well from Harald Henn, who is very much into call center, came to the point that there are some medical institutions which utilize in a smart way pre-operative preparations of patients utilizing not only human beings but a lot of AI, and give them, now it's hard for me to say, even a better empathic experience as they are getting experience from human beings.
Why even?
As I normally would say, out of my experience, that I prefer a human being as being my counterpart, but I learned
even more experience. Empathy means there's a lot of empathy already there, which in my experience is not the case. That's why it's so easy for chatbots to be better. Easy as.
And the chatbots or the artificial intelligence-based systems are not bored to death by getting the 50th time the same question. Yeah, Thomas, I'm in a learning phase. Yeah, you should embrace it. I was.
And they don't yell back normally.
Yeah, yelling is not one of their favorites. You're right. So, have you, as you have a not sophisticated large amount of AI-driven customers on your end, heard some messaging in either Austria or in the areas where you are in business, Christian, where they have positively been embracing and being enthusiastic, also telling you about their return on investment scenarios they have found in utilizing artificial intelligence in conjunction with whatsoever systems, ERP or CRM?
No, the big enthusiastic ROI. No, I think there's people who are open-minded, trying things out, making experiences. That's what I see, But that this is now the breaking change and makes everything new and everything better. Not yet. I think there's some cases where people are basically getting to and trying to utilize it. That's the other thing. I just have seen the opposite, where we very often get customers asking, okay, what's your AI strategy and what are you doing with AI? And asking them, what do you want or what would you expect? We don't know. Reminds me pretty much of the last, I survived also like 10 years where people told me social selling, and I said, what do you mean by that? And there came nothing and social selling. And in the meantime, I think nothing or dead or whatever. So people learned that this is something, okay, was a nice term. Nobody understood what it was about, but I had to ask it. And then not. And I think the same AI. So we have some customers who have some realistic ideas about where they see AI cases and want to discuss this openly, and others just ask, okay, what do you have for AI? I need some AI, which I think is just, okay. So
having said this, I still believe that open minds are a suitable approach in going towards this artificial intelligence movement, to say so, as it appeared, it became popular and it will stay. And there is no doubt about it. And the learning experience in just my little ecosystem is I try to do search differently. I try to get some help in formulating or creating emails, as I have also sometimes repetitive, boring tasks, which I love to throw over to my non-existing assistants. Yeah, so I'm curious, and yes, I'm not seriously earning my money with it yet, but as time goes by, things might change. Yeah, and
No, I completely agree with you. I think, but the topic is, I think, take a realistic stance to it and say, okay, it will not change everything.
yeah,
It will not make the world fall apart. It's the same. Like, I think it's so funny being on this planet for a little bit longer now. So you see on my gray hair. So it was the same. I think. Remember when we had all these automation things? So everybody said, okay, all the
yeah,
robots will. None of us will have jobs. Where are we? We're working more than we worked before. Come on. So it's not the case. And the same then came PCs and everything said, okay, now PCs doing everything. What are we? We're more slaves to that. And the same, I think AI, I think it will come to a point where we'll figure out, okay, what it is for. The only thing I think, but that's a even more probably, let's say, philosophical discussion is if you will put it to a good use or not. Yeah. So if we make some good things, or we just basically produce pictures of ourselves as the Pope and publish that on social media, not naming anybody who did this recently. I think there's definitely some danger in there as well. Where I hope, okay, at least mankind will and humanity will be intelligent enough to basically see the danger in it as well and basically contain it. And the same and of course, like I also tried, writing emails, whatever, and I think it's fun, and writing documents. But on the other hand, if you are serious and honest to yourself, it writes a bunch of bullshit, and it writes nice formulas and formulates it nicely and whatever, But in the end, the content, if you really want to say something, it doesn't take your time away. So it takes the same time because you have to rewrite it and then summarize it and rewrite it a bit more. So if you're serious about the message you're sending or the document you're writing or the book you're writing, then it's still work is still on you. And I doubt that it really will make life so much easier, It makes life easier if you don't care about it. But then the other thing is, then I say, okay, then why do it, So if I want to write,
easy. Why do we have so many AI generated books that sell like crazy?
Do we have that?
Yeah. So much so that quite some of the ebook selling agencies are trying to restrict it. So apparently there's a market for the creators of these types of books.
That's completely clear, but you can also ask, like, if you, at least I'm not that addicted, but I have 4 kids. I know the crap that's being produced on TikTok, and they spend hours on it. Just a waste of time,
Praying to the choir here.
On the other hand, if you really think about the books is probably good stuff, the really good books are very special in their kind, and there's not so many of those. Of course, like some standard formats, whatever, and potentially even music, you can have music produced. So if you basically go to the elevator and have the elevator music, that can probably be produced by AI. But on the other hand, there's some songs that will remain iconic, and they are because they are, and
those were created in the 70s and 80s.
Now there are some, I would not say that. So books are written today that are completely special in terms of how they are written and whatever, And I think if you read those, they make a difference, Like the standard stuff, I think, clear. But this is like a copying part. But this comes back to the customer service, Do you want to provide an outstanding customer service, or do you just want to copy and basically make the customer go away? You just want to send them an answer so they go away? That's fine. AI can do a perfect job. And I agree with you, Ralph. They will never shout at a customer, and they will never say, don't ask me that question again, and they will never have this emotion. But on the other hand, I had some even customer experience where I was shouting at somebody and they were shouting at me, and afterwards we had a great long-lasting, let's say, business relationship. Sometimes it's good to have emotions, it's nothing bad about that,
No. Not always, you're right. And
No.
This comes to close of the hour, if I'm not mistaken. And now I'm stuck.
Ask AI, ChatGPT, what do we do next,
Hey, ChatGPT, what are our famous last words?
Yeah.
So what is... Let me help Ralph a little. Be his AI. Be his HI. When do you think will businesses recognize that the best use of AI is not for cost cutting?
Are you asking Ralph or asking me?
No, I'm asking you. You are the one who is supposed to answer to have the famous last word, so that we can terminate the session.
Very, very open. The intelligent people know that already.
Okay, so you basically just said that people are stupid.
No. But
because they are not acting like that.
No. I think it's the same. See, it's coming back because this is a CRM converse. It's like the same. If you think CRM is just a controlling tool, you're wrong. If you think AI will just help you reduce people, you're also wrong. And I think the people I talk to have a certain vision. Don't think it's cutting costs. They want to do something better with it, support their people better or support the customers better. They don't want to move them away and basically reduce the routine tasks, whatever, So I think they have a very, let's say, honest view to that, but also a realistic one, and saying, okay, it will not do the magic. It will not replace everything. It can help the people, and it can make people be better, and it can take some routine tasks away. But I think they're also aware, at least the people I talk to, where I think they have a realistic approach to AI and also realistic expectations. They don't think this will do the utter magic. So reduce all the people and whatever. You might do it, but on the other hand, the story that went through is like Klarna, trying to reduce service by 50%. I avoid Klarna as much as I can, because their customer service is the worst. So simple, and my honest opinion, So, and if you can write down, I don't care about customers, then you can basically use AI and reduce the costs and reduce the customer interaction, and have the AI keep the customers away from your service desk and say, okay, I'm like the Ryanair of customer service, even so their customer service is not even that bad any longer, So they are not even that bad, But if you say that, then AI will be the case. But I think the majority of companies, I think, take it seriously, don't think this will be just an efficiency game, and not reduce.
So in summary, there's hope.
There's
hope.
In the end, it will be good, and if it's not good, it's not the end,
That is a very optimistic perspective.
Thanks a lot for this hour plus. Thanks a lot also to whoever did not actively participate but stayed in. LinkedIn says that there are some. And well, then tune in next week. Maybe you too, Christian, when we are talking to Björn Nagelmann about whether CRM is dead again, or still, or not.
It's not there.
He's not Tobias Schlömer, who we know from some former CRM convos as well in different roles. And as a book author, he is also questioning himself Where are we going to?
This is a very good question.
Ghostwriters. Okay. See you next week.
Take care.
Thank you.